Today I'm going to get started on a coffee table build for my house. And I salvaged these legs from an old broken coffee table, but what I need to do is change a few things to these legs. Now, I also built a coffee table for a client that showed how I made these legs. So I'm going to link that in the description below, so this way you can go back and watch that, how I made these legs. These are the same style that I made, except for the fact that this has carved detail in there, but more than likely this, production run, this was probably made by a CNC machine in somebody's shop somewhere. So I'm just going to salvage these legs, but what I want to do is get rid of, you see this block here? Okay, this is to hold the apron. Now I don't like the rounded part of this, and I'm going to cut this off. Also, the joinery on this, you can see, was made for dowels, and I'm not going to use dowels to do that joinery. I want to use mortise and tenon joints. So the first thing I'm going to do is cut these blocks off, but you can see I have a cradle set up in my miter saw. That's to get the proper angle and cut it at 90 degrees because these legs are curved. These are the blocks that are going to house the apron that sit on top of the legs. I'm just going to mark the location of where I need the mortises to be. And now I'll use my mortising machine to cut the mortises on those blocks. Now I'll find the center of my plates, then find the center of the blocks. This way I can drill perfect holes to match them up and attach them with screws and glue. By using the holes that I drilled and the guide marks that I made, I can attach the blocks to the plates. Now to attach those blocks to the legs, I'll use glue. I'll position it where I want it, and then I'll pin nail it in place. This way it clamps it down and holds it until the glue cures. Now I'll get to work on milling up the lumber for the top and the apron. Now, most of you know my process for milling lumber, but if you're not familiar with it, you can go back on my channel. I actually have a video called Milling, Layout, and Design. And I also usually talk about milling process as I go along in other videos. Those beach chairs in the back of the shot right there are a real kick in the butt because it's freezing in my shop right now. Once I'm done with the milling, I'm back at the table saw, and I'm not only making the edges parallel, but I'm also trimming them to their final dimensions. Now that I have all the pieces of the top in position where I need them, I'm going to just lay out some lines here for the biscuits. I'm going to be joining this top with biscuits. They're just going to help me to align the piece. They don't add any significant strength at all. Now you may see the different variations of the colors in these pieces of wood that I'm using for the top. That's all going to just disappear and completely be covered once I put the dark stain on this thing. And now it's time to add some glue and number 20 biscuits.
Now once I let the top cure overnight, it's over to the drum sander to pass it through and level everything out. I'm using 80 grit paper on this and it saves me a ton of time. Now I'm over to the jointer with the top first and I'm going to square up one edge. Then I'm over to the table saw to trim it to its final length and width. I'm going to use my panel sled here and I'm going to trim up one edge square and then I'm going to run that edge along the fence and cut it to its final length. The panel sled is a great jig, especially for oversized pieces like this. Now I'm going to start to work on the tenons on the aprons, and for that I'm going to use my miter gauge to cut the shoulders, and then I'm going to use my fence to cut the rest of the tenons off to create that tongue. I'm sure you can probably guess that in the near future I'm going to be making a tenoning jig in one of the videos here for the shop. All that's left now on these tenons is to use a sharp chisel to clean up the shoulders and then use a gent saw to cut it to the size that I need. And now I'll use my router with an OG style bit to create a nice profile on the edges of the tabletop. To speed up the process, I want to glue this table up in one shot. So what I'm going to do is use a strap clamp with some corner blocks. And then I'll add some extra clamps over the top of that. And after you add these clamps, this is a really good time to check square.
Okay, so I have this all clamped up. I checked square from corner to corner. If it wasn't square, I've told you once before, you could always put a clamp on the diagonal, crank it until you get it into the square measurements that you need to make it perfect. So I'm going to let this sit overnight until it's completely cured, and tomorrow what we'll do is we'll work on making the top clips, which we're going to use the biscuit joiner to actually make a slot and put some wooden clips in there, and that's going to be to attach the table from the bottom. And the top is done, so once we cut those clips and get them ready to install, everything's going to get stained and then 3 coats of the polyurethane and we're done.
First, in making the tabletop clips, I'm going to cut a slot in the apron on the inside, and then I'm going to size the actual tenon to that slot. I'll use my table saw to cut a rabbet in the back of a piece that I'm going to use for the tabletop clips. This rabbet that I cut out will leave a tongue which is going to fit in the slot created by the biscuit cutter. Over at the miter saw, I'll cut each piece to about 1.5 inches. Now I'm finally getting to apply some stain here, getting close to the finish line. After I apply the stain, I always use a shop rag and wipe off all the excess so that I get a nice even color. For the finish, I'm spraying 3 coats of poly and I'm sanding with 400 grit in between each coat. That's it, we're wrapping up this project. And for the tabletop clips, all you have to do is put them in the slots and then screw them through the bottom of the tabletop, and then I'm flipping the table over. Thank you all for watching this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did making this project. See you next time in the shop. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. This way you'll get notified every time I upload a video. And also follow me on Instagram, where I post short video clips and pictures.